Hello and a very warm welcome to Strengthening Your Team's webinars. This is the third in this series. I hope you've caught up on the previous two. And whether you're a manager, whether you're a coach or whether you're a facilitator, we're going to be helping you understand more about our team profile within strengths and look at the frequencies, the families, give you some tips on best practice, a little bit of a demo, and make sure you've got a real sense of the overview of the profile as well. We're also going to be addressing that really important what next question. So never leaving a team or a client without talking about how to embed strengths in the organisation, how to take it forward, how to make today's session really count and take that learning going forward. So looking forward to sharing that with you. Before we move on to that, just a quick recap on a couple of pieces of research around strengths in teams, some of this you may know from your own work. I guess from a practical experience, bringing teams to life, I simply love working with teams. It's why we wrote the toolkit. And sometimes it's really important just to take the data that we give you within the profile and allow teams to reflect on their strengths and their weaknesses and give them some exercises to bring this data to life and see the difference that they can make by being more self-aware. There's something magical about sharing the data with a team as we'll go on to look at how you can be doing more of that in your sessions. So let's take an overview of the actual profile itself. So it's really important to note that it uses the expert profiles, and most of you who've been using this already will know that. So all 60 strengths are assessed rather than just those that are used in the introductory profile. And that's so that we can give you more of a rich data overview of your team. So the team members are listed in the profile, so who appears in the profile, but their data is anonymised. So what you don't see is the 60 strengths of all of your team members. And that is really important because what we can use here is that data in a really positive way. So we can look at those that perhaps can add real value to the session, that one person who has it as a realised strength when perhaps others have it as learned. They can hold their hand up and say, I can support the team. So it's really important that we use the data we share all 60, but we don't actually list the team members themselves. And again, the way to bring that to life is use the individual profiles with the team profile and just ask those that have got, that can really feel they can lend a hand. They've got those unique strengths in the team to come forward. So we're going to move on to a little bit more around the quadrancy data with frequency going forward. But what you see here is the 7 that you're used to in terms of the realised strengths. But as a facilitator, really tell the story of the team. Not just that they've got pride. This team love high quality work. This team are all about making a difference with the output that they give. So it's great that we've got the pride, persistence. You can see here innovation, drive, creativity, relationship improvement. But what does that look like for the team? And what are their beliefs, their skills? How does it mean that they use these talents in everyday life? So try and tell a little bit of a story as you introduce the team and their profile. It gives you advice on how to apply and what to consider for the team. So this tends to be something that you might take on later on. So in the session itself, you might not use this advice, but please do refer to it. It's been thought out quite carefully by the CAP team. So use this as some really great advice here about what this team can do to take their strengths to the next level and advice on how to apply it. We'll then look at that distribution of the 60 strengths across the team, and it is in a family order. We'll come on to that a little bit later. And we look at the team toolkit. We'll come on to that in terms of some best practice and some demos of the team toolkit. But take this data of the team, use the team toolkit that we have, and think about how you can use this to get the best from your team. There's some great exercises in there to take it forward. That, in a nutshell, is our team profile. Then how to actually apply that, what to do with it, is some of the things that we'll be covering next. So the first thing I'd love to share with you is the frequencies. So what to pay attention to. So as we saw before, this is the same profile I've used, pride. So 10 out of 10 people have pride as a realised strength in the team. What we've done here is just trying to give you some ballpark figures to kind of understand what are high frequencies and what are low frequencies. What should you be paying attention to? So when we look at the realised strengths, so these are kind of rule of thumb figures, pay attention to those that have over 70% within the quadrant. So Typically, teams will have sort of somewhere between 60 to 80%, they will share the top 7 in terms of frequency. Where you see above this, you really know that this team are on the same page. They are thriving with this strength. They are all sharing the same passion. Of course, that's something that you can take and excel and develop further and make sure you channel it in the right direction. It's also something that you might want a conversation with the team about how not to overplay it when all 10 out of 10 in the team have it as a realised strength. Pride, the example that we've got here, the danger of this one could be, of it being overplayed, could be the fact that execution can be difficult if the team are constantly looking for high quality all the time. How often do they execute on time? With the unrealised strengths, then we look at 40% around variance. So outside of that, you know that you've got a unique or a common team. So as an example here, we've got the 10. So we'll be looking about 4 out of 10. That's a typical weighting here on frequencies. If you were to see 8 or 9 here in unrealised strengths, you then know, I wonder what the pattern is. Why aren't this team optimising that strength? What's happening to make them not be able to use this? It's a little bit out of the ordinary what we're seeing here. So really then thinking about the opportunities for that team to be dialing that up. I guess where you've got lower numbers as well, what you're seeing here in both realised and unrealised strength is more of a unique team. The learned behaviours are really important as well. So we have, those of you that are accredited will know, we typically have more learned behaviours than we have realised strengths. So looking at this kind of 70% balance, but in your team, where you've got more than that, the team really are kind of saying, there's a risk of burnout here when we're all de-energised by the same thing. So what are the patterns in how they work where this could manifest itself? So the counterpoint here is draining for 9 out of 10 people in the team. I wonder what's going on around when they share their ideas. Are they taken on board? Are they having to share too many ideas around new ways forward? Perhaps there's something around the way in which they present their ideas. They're not given opportunities. So something here makes this team low on energy around counterpoint, but of course they can do it. So these are great ones to unpick around the team where you've got high numbers. But with just bear in mind that this team could potentially be at risk of burnout where you've got high numbers of learned behaviours there. Moving on to the weaknesses then, again, we look at around 50%. So I'm always talking to teams where I could, and just whatever the weakness is, it's always about what's the impact, as you will know. What's the impact of this weakness on this particular team or person? Start to pay more attention though when it starts to get over 50%. Under that, you've typically got those in the team that can really support the different team members, or perhaps in the way that you work. Other people will have this as strengths or unrealised strengths, or even learned behaviours. There's a competency around learned behaviours. I can do it well. So where the weaknesses go above 50%, I mean, they're starting to get more towards the majority of the team are not so good at this. So what do the team need to do? What's the impact? What are the strengths that can support this team? And of course, potentially, who do we need to recruit for to really support the team if those numbers are high? So that's the frequencies. Again, all this is really kind of just little bits of advice as to how to use those numbers and direct your team. So coming on to the full distribution of the strengths families. So I've mentioned the fact that it reviews all 60 strengths through the expert profile, takes those profiles and looks at all 60 within the team. It does it anonymously, as I mentioned. What this is really, really helpful for is spotting the critical data outside of the quadrant. So what do I mean by that? As an example, the quadrant before will give you the 7 realised strengths. So what if number 8 was strategic awareness, and it was really important for the team to recognise that strategic awareness was high in the team, based on the fact that they've got these lots of strategy projects coming up or longer term thinking that they need to pay attention to. So it can just help highlight the sort of the top and bottom two within each family. So here we see pride and centred being high, and towards the bottom we see unconditionality and authenticity within the being family slightly lower. So it can be just really helpful to kind of think about what was that number 5th weakness? Does it tell us a story that the quadrant didn't? So how I use this is to pay attention to the top 2 within each family. So you could run an exercise as an example here, is sort of splitting the team up and asking them to take a family, and what is the impact of the top two being so high, and how do we use it, how do we celebrate ourselves, what could we be doing more, and what's the impact of those at the bottom. Those of you that will remember or have looked at the webinar 2 around the world's most popular strengths will know that communicating is lower in their family. So you're looking to that communicating family and thinking, what are the top two? How do this team prefer to communicate? And how does it impact the way that we work with each other and our stakeholders? And then looking at sort of the bottom two as well. It can help you think about critical gaps. And the one that we can see here, we've got service, unconditionality, and authenticity, with none of the team members sharing this as an unrealised or a realised strength. So what's the impact of that as a team? Thinking about the gaps, it can really kind of highlight where one or two individuals can support the team further, but also perhaps where there are no individuals and what the team might need to do. So in summary of this section, I mentioned at the beginning, it's about presenting the data and taking some great exercises to facilitate a session that can really bring this to some form of action. So the best sessions that I've run have been where the team have been in charge of kind of taking that data and channeling it into action. So, a great SWOT analysis you could do on the back of it that we can come on to. But the team now know that these are things that they're trained in, these are things that they're brilliant at, this is their talent that they're not tapping into, their unrealised strengths, and these are the things that they perhaps need some support in. And helping them think about their goals that they have coming up for this particular team and sharing the data. So where you can align the data with actions is where you'll really see some trajectory of improvements within that team. So I want to come on to the workshops themselves and look at some best practice and also perhaps a couple of exercises to support you, the favourites from our toolkit. So it might sound really obvious, but being clear on the objectives. So having run many team workshops, and many clients coming to us thinking around, what they want to achieve with this particular client. So, is it around a new team that's come together that want to get to know each other? Have there been some difficulties in the team that they want to sort of build trust? Do they have a strategy that they're working towards next year where they need some support? So, is it an amalgamation of two teams that now really kind of need to sort of set some ground rules? So, being clear on kind of the type of team and also the objectives, because sometimes you're given 2 or 3 hours and you need to really turn around a team in a direction that perhaps is not feasible. Obviously, we need to talk to the facilitator or the manager about. So being really clear on actually what you're there to do in that time frame. Strengths are something that are really positive, really engaging, and whatever the objectives are, that the people that you have the privilege of being brought together for this event will have a brilliant time and be more self-aware about their passions. But unless we can tie that to the objectives, then it tends not to be so sustainable. In an ideal world, we would recommend that you give debriefs before the team session or workshop. If you're not able to do that for whatever reason, then we would really recommend at the beginning of the session, perhaps after you've introduced strengths, that you give some kind of buddying or peer coaching exercise. There's a couple in the toolkit that we suggest. That way they get to know their own profile before perhaps going into the team session. We can be really clear on the terminology as well. But even if you're not doing the debriefs, you will need to speak with a manager or somebody to understand the team, the dynamics, how they work. Are they remote? Who sits where? What's been going on in the team? What are the types of goals? Do they have shared goals and shared visions? How clear are they on their strategy, on their vision and their goals? How aligned are they? They're really important questions. There's some good questions in the team toolkit as well to drill down with that manager to make sure you really get to know the team. Organising your strengths profiles, ideally 2 to 3 weeks. There's always an annual leave or an out of office on that will throw you, and you will pay, unfortunately, if you create one and then sort of add a couple of people in and create another one. So please do think about pressing that button within the team profile once everyone's completed their profiles. At that point, then thinking about the toolkit or even your own knowledge around what you've done around strengths, if you're not using the toolkit, design your session with that knowledge about really what we're here to do, and also the type of people that we've got on the team and the ways in which they work. You know, we've run them where we've had people dial in virtually, as well as being in a face-to-face session as well. So there's hopefully lots of different exercises for you to choose from based on your team. We always recommending once you've received your profile on the platform and you know the team, you know the data, that you share it with the manager in advance, just to make sure that there are no surprises. So it's important then you kind of walk through the quadrant, share the story that I mentioned. Does this sound like your team with the passions and skills and beliefs that you can bring alive that quadrant data to share with the manager? And this is your team in action. You know, what do you resonate with? What sounds really positive? What might you be worried about? What do you want to address in the session more so than what we've already discussed? Now you know the data. In the best practice in terms of the session itself then is always leaving the team with actions, you know, allowing plenty of time to come away with at least 2 or 3 clear actions, and also aligning the people to take the actions away with those that have the right strengths in those areas. And maybe there's catalysts or the missions or the action, and there's some kind of analysis of what happened. You know, maybe someone's taken some photographs of some of the flip charts that you've made. But the key important thing are the actions, and even more critical than that, I've already mentioned it once, I'm going to talk about it again, is the what next. So really addressing that piece at the end of the session where it's been really successful and the whole team is saying, okay, what do we do next? I know my strengths, and I know my colleagues' strengths, and I know my team's strengths, but what do we do now? So we're going to share something on that towards the end of the session here, but in the interim, always have that in the back of your mind. How is this team going to be using strengths going forward after the session, and how can I support them do that? I always tell teams or managers or clients, you know, strengths is an approach and a way of life. It's not an away day, 2 hours. I couldn't think of anything else what to do or how to fill the away day time. So please really think about that as you go into any session, whether it's your team or whether you're facilitating it for somebody else. Okay, so I just wanted to highlight a couple of exercises, ones that in our time we know that work really, really well. They're featured in the team toolkit, but we'll also just give you a flavour of the toolkit and how it works. So the toolkit is sectioned up into 14 different sections around best practice and introducing strengths, and how it looks at the exercises then is around understanding my own profile, understanding my colleagues' profiles, and then the team profile. So this exercise I share with you here is around understanding my colleagues' profile. So traditionally this would follow something around a bit of a peer coaching buddy session around my own profile. I now know a little bit more around my profile and my strengths and aware of how I'm using them. I now want to pick up a few things to share with my team members. So here I want to list my key realised strengths. So those of you that know me, having headed up strengths profiles for some time and listened to me in many different ways, perhaps the accreditation will know that I've got 15 or so profiles. Over that time, I've got 3 that are really key to me that have stayed with me in all my 15 profiles. So typically we've got sort of 2 or 3 that just feel like we would wear them. You know, if we lost those, we would lose an arm. So you really want to be able to sort of sharing the 7, asking the team members to share the critical key ones that, you know, they would be lost without. Then also thinking about, you know, what I would love to do more of in this team. So really kind of saying how I can help you, what I'd love to do more, what I want to step up a bit more into in the team, you know, and also sort of really vocalising that. Remember, unrealised strengths are things that perhaps your team members haven't seen you use before. What you want to do less of, so thinking about the learned behaviours and any ways in which these might be kind of de-energising in the team. So a really common place in a team exercise or conversation will be somebody will have used this exercise and say, but you're really good at that, why do you want to do less of it? And of course, you know, this particular team member might be overplaying it, the team might be utilising it too much for them in the team, and they're now a bit burned out by it. So this is their team member's chance to really say what I want to do less of, and really vocalising how their profile has an impact on the team and what they can do about it, and of course how you might need support and weaknesses. So there's just an example here of one that I created before I put in a mission statement here or a logo or catchphrase that can be helpful. You can also put in here things like, one thing you didn't know about me, or something a bit more of a fun fact. So, I guess this just gives you a sense of how that data can then really tell a story to your colleagues around how you can help me, how you can kind of support me more and utilising more of my strengths. Just call on me for these are things that I want to be doing more of. Another really successful exercise is the achieving your goals. So in here we look at something quite simple within the workshop, something you need to achieve, a task or a goal. And I guess this exercise is very much around application. So now I know my strengths. I had a couple of exercises in where I kind of got to know my profile a bit. I understand the terminology. And now I really think about how can I apply it. This is always such a useful exercise, I think, working through with someone who knows you, one of your colleagues, and who knows the environment and has now started to learn the language. How do your strengths support you? What will you do? And what's the impact of your learned behaviours and weaknesses? What will you do? How will you compensate? So the what will you do being really important, that kind of first exercise here around, I know my profile and now I'm going to apply it. So this is, again, if you have the time, one I would really recommend you throwing in there. And then a team one I just thought I would share with you. So there are a few bullets here. You can have less if you have less time. And typically how I might run this exercise is I might divide the team up, give into twos or threes, or with bigger numbers if necessary, and give them strengths and threats, and then give another team opportunities and weaknesses. So they're kind of addressing positive and not so positive or slightly more de-energizing tasks. And also, or you might give them a quadrant each and come back and present on a flip chart, and from there you'd expect some actions to be coming through. It's really important to think about not just the team and the data that you've got in front of you on the team profile, but how it's used, what their excitement is going forward, what are the potentials, and what do they see as the real sort of business critical weaknesses. So once you've displayed the team profile and given it out and just given a really quick overview of the team, maybe sort of 10 minutes about what you see, allow them to do the work by bringing it to life with some questions. There are other different exercises you can bring it to life, but this one tends to be pretty successful and fairly stable around helping the team take that data again into application, and of course the most important, what next, what do we do with it. On that note, my last couple of slides around the all-important what next. So there's no point me just talking about it. I want to give you some suggestions around what next. So with individuals and teams, it's about constant feedback, appreciating strengths. I saw this strength in action. This was the impact it had. This is how I noticed you use it. So really sort of thinking about when you see energy and calling it. It really helps people stand tall and appreciate some of the strengths that perhaps that they just thought were them. Let's say that they had an authenticity strength or a gratitude strength, and perhaps don't see the use of it so much as some of the other strengths. Really taking time to appreciate the value that those strengths bring to the team. So taking time out to do that. Making your profiles really visible. It sounds obvious, the language. So something that you're bringing into team meetings or talking about, having something on your desk. But referencing those 60 strengths, always in the terminology of the learned behaviours in conversations. So there are many different suggestions here around taking it from an individual level. Some of these may not apply to all of you or all of your teams. What we would ask is just that you share these types of tips with your teams that you're working with to give them food for thought about how they can be using the data going forward. It wants to be a continual language, something that's sustainable in the team, and that's going to come through building that strengths-based culture rather than a 2 or 3 hour team session. So, looking at so how leaders and managers can take the data going forward. So we do have a manager insights profile, but outside of that, what are the things that they can be doing? How they can be taking this information and running the way that they run their meetings, introducing strengths at the beginning. What was the best bit about their week? How do they apply their strengths? Thinking about performance conversations or catch-ups, one-to-ones. Give them some real tips on thinking about strengths and taking it forward. That's how you'll build that sustainable strengths-based culture in teams. And take it from me, it's the one biggest question at the end of every session is, this was brilliant, are you coming back? At that point, we may not know, we may not have a strategy for the date and time of which we were coming back, but helping them to kind of keep it going in the interim. Maybe your return visit will be helping them to think about next year's strategy and who can take the lead in different roles, but thinking about how they can take it forward. So leave them with that parting gift. On that note, I'm going to leave you. Thank you very much indeed for listening. So this is the third in our series of webinars. Do go visit our webinar site on the www.strengthsprofile.com to download different recordings. Keep in touch with the different webinars that we'll be putting up and signing up for them. If you miss them, do watch the recording. In the interim, thank you very much for your time today. I hope you've enjoyed listening to our tips on developing and strengthening teams, and we look forward to being in touch soon. Bye for now. Take care.